Nearly 3 years ago, I created a video in response to a group known as Campaign for Houston. My response came as a result of their TV spot which preyed on common bigoted talking points about trans rights, namely that the trans lobby was either knowingly or carelessly pushing for legislation that would allow sex offenders into your child's bathroom stall to rape them. Note, the clip I'm about to play is rather grim.
Houston's Proposition 1 bathroom ordinance. What does it mean to you? Any man at any time could enter a woman's bathroom simply by claiming to be a woman that day. No one is exempt. Even registered sex offenders could follow women or young girls into the bathroom, and if a business tried to stop them, they'd be fined. Protect women's privacy. Prevent danger. Vote no on the Proposition 1 bathroom ordinance. It goes too far.
So I took this to town over the facts at first. The HERO ordinance, which added protections for numerous groups including veterans, disabled people, and yes, trans folks, in no way legalised stalking or sexual assault. The idea that said bill would allow for a sex offender to follow and then bust into someone else's toilet stall to rape them is fucking ridiculous. And note, if they're going to do that anyway, then they vaguely don't need said bill because they could just walk through the outer door. What? You think a shiny piece of blue plastic will stop them doing what they're willing to bust through a stall door to do? Second, the campaign was so concerned about sexual predators that one of the main campaign heads pushing said no vote was Reverend Kendall Baker, who was removed from office for sexually assaulting female members of staff. A fact that was publicly known at the time, and yet Campaign for Houston chose to ignore because, let's be honest, said campaign was never about protecting children or women, but rather harassing and ostracizing trans people. Which leads me on to today's video, which is titled, No on Free, Keep Massachusetts Safe.
What does Massachusetts Question 3 mean to you? It means any man who says he is a woman can enter a woman's locker room, dressing room, or bathroom at any time, even convicted sex offenders. And if you see something suspicious and say something to authorities, you could be the one arrested and fined up to $50,000. Vote no on 3. This bathroom bill puts our privacy and safety at risk. It goes too far.
Now clearly this campaign video was taking direct cues from the first. The opening lines are near identical before going on to talk about how any man and including registered/convicted sex offenders, both also forwarded that reporting or challenging anything suspicious could result in the person raising the issue being punished. In the first it was businesses being fined, in the latter it was the person making the complaint. So first things first, this just isn't true. Nothing about the bill, which was passed and became active in October of 2016, stated anything close to what's being claimed here at any level. For a start, reporting suspicious activity never had been and hasn't become a crime with the passing of said bill. Active discrimination in unfairly excluding trans people from their respective changing and bathrooms in public areas has. If you target and harass or even assault a trans person, there will be trouble. But no such precedent exists in raising a concern if you spot someone doing something suspicious such as looking under cubicle doors or fiddling around with what looks like small cameras in the corner. And that's regardless of the person's gender. In starting, I'd just like to note that this bill does not affect schools in any way, which already had said discrimination policy following a 2012 revision of the Access to Equal Education Opportunity Regulation laws and subsequent policy guidelines which state clearly that, quote, in all cases, the principal should be clear with the student and parent that the student may access the restroom, locker room, and changing facility that corresponds to the student's gender identity, end quote. And it should be noted that, thus far, no issues have been reported. But the bill in question here, so Bill S2407, is on about all non-educational public spaces, such as hotels, restaurants, healthcare facilities, and gyms. As noted, the bill passed in October of 2016, but it's now up for public vote on the 6th of November 2018, following a signature petition drive by those opposed to the bill. Those opposed to the bill are defending the vote no corner, whilst those in support of it are upholding the vote yes corner. Now, the No team has resorted to pushing out all the same misinformation that has become commonplace in discussion about trans rights and access to gendered facilities. Fact is, in doing so, they're actually endangering children, and in stating that, I mean all children, both trans and cisgender. The entire basis for the campaign is that gender-segregated bathrooms are an effective means to stop sexual predators having access to your children. This is deeply flawed for many reasons. For a start, it forgets that only about half of all children will ever use female changing rooms, with the other half being placed in the male changing rooms, and here's a fact. All children should be protected from sex offenders, not just girls. Second, some registered sex offenders already have access to female changing rooms. They're called female sex offenders, and I'm on about cis women, not trans women. Women who identify with the gender they were assigned at birth can assault children as well. Then of course we have child-abusing couples, heterosexual couples who work with one another to gather materials and abuse children. Sometimes it's not a couple, however, sometimes it can be a ring involving numerous individuals of any gender composition. This can be, as is relevant to the bill, women placing cameras inside the female changing rooms to supply their associates with media displaying sensitive content, or it can be in luring children to somewhere where the others can abuse them. The latter is often done on the basis that children are most often taught that stranger danger comes in male form, allowing child abusers to use that to their advantage in using women they know to gain the child's trust and lure them into a compromising situation. Child abusers know society's perceptions and uses them to their advantage. Then we have the fact that there are other ways for men to get access to female changing rooms. A lot of people assume that most establishments have members of cleaning staff of both genders, but this is not always the case. I don't know the legality of it, but I've seen cleaning staff of one gender go into the toilets of another, and whilst you may think it's odd, you likely won't challenge it, as we tend to respect authority which comes with a uniform, even that of a janitor. But getting such a uniform raises no difficulty. Neither does installing a camera in, say, a changing stool's lights once you do. Just a degree of confidence in what you're doing is enough to slip past most people. So how can we overcome this? Well, we can stop living in the fantasy that tells us that women are all pure people in need of protection. We can start teaching our children to look out for specific signs irrespective of gender. We can teach people how to understand the notions of personal boundaries and respecting those boundaries, and calling out any invasion that crosses said boundaries. We can also improve our infrastructure. One problem I've noticed is that many of the problems seen with stools, both bathroom and changing, are not inherent. They're design flaws which often result from a desire to cut corners and use less materials to save on cost at the sacrifice of security. Solution: don't allow businesses to get away with doing that, not because this bill changes anything, but because it already allows for said invasion. A lot of the Vote No page on Facebook is taken up with stories of cis men entering bathrooms in places without these laws, no care about the plastic on the door, and looking either under or through the cracks between the door and the frame. Now of course they select a certain sample of stories to spin their narrative, ignoring where women have done the same or assisted their partners or some abuse ring does so. They're not protecting children, they're wasting time and resources that could have been put to use doing so to instead harass trans folk. You could create the most isolated space in which only women and children were allowed, and that space would still not be safe from sexual predators. And I can say that with certainty because that was my life at one point in history. I lived for a while in a women's refuge when I was a small child, and it was during my time there that both my brother and myself were sexually assaulted. When we pretend that an all-women space is a safe zone for children, we ultimately fail a portion of said children, since not only has their safety not been ensured, but when they come forward, ideas like these can and do act to downplay their trauma. Now, I do not think we need to end segregated spaces. I acknowledge the benefits they do have in very select social contexts, such as the refuge I mentioned earlier. It allowed women to heal in what for them was a wonderful place. All I'm forwarding is an increased vigilance and the doing away of transphobic talking points which have no basis in reality. Because that's all it is, a talking point. The bill itself noted, quote, the Attorney General's office shall issue regulation or guidance for referring to appropriate law enforcement agency or other appropriate authority for legal action any person whose assertion of a gender identity is for an improper purpose, as provided in Clause 59 of Section 7 of Chapter 4. End quote. So what the campaign video claims is the case falls apart immediately. The Council acknowledges and is prepared for instances which could occur if a cis person were to attempt to abuse said laws. So the claim that calling out something suspicious would result in you being punished doesn't stack up the moment you read Bill S2407. As for the $50,000 civil penalty, yes, that's 50, not 15 as I thought, and prison time to anyone who reports anything suspicious, that's just not true on both accounts. To receive that fine, you not only have to be proven of causing substantial discriminatory grievance against a trans person, but this would have to be the third discriminatory incident, with at least 2 prior incidents having occurred in the past 7 years, as is made clear in Section 5 of 151B, Massachusetts General Discrimination Ordinance, which was passed on 2006, which applies to discrimination in housing, discrimination in advertisements, discrimination in admission of people, and discrimination in admission of guide dogs. So not only have the Vote No front lied about said penalty applying to complaints about suspicious activity, since nowhere is that discussed in Section 4 of 151B or Sections 92A or 98 and 98A of 272, which lays out said unlawful practices of discrimination, but they've also lied about the amount one can be charged for a one-off incident, even if that were the case. You'd have to be proven a serial discriminator to receive said penalty. So as long as you avoid actively going out and discriminating against trans people, as well as other protected demographics, you have nothing to fear from said law, which again, already existed before Bill S2407 was added to the board, and trans people are merely being included in said pre-existing provisions through the revision. Also note, there would have to be a commission hearing and investigation of said incidents, in effect revealing the facts that yes, this could only work if the person being discriminated against was indeed trans. So why is this appearing in their campaign video? Well, because they don't actually give a good reason when pressed. They say that 3 incidents could simply be 3 separate complaints made by the same cis man, not realizing that this would still call for investigation to substantiate their complaint, which would place them under scrutiny as well. Fact is, the same situation can be applied to any protected category in the same fear-mongering way, and it would be just as valid, which is to say, not at all. Now, there are also a couple of other fines involved. Section 92A of Chapter 272, which details discrimination in advertisements, gives a maximum $100 fine, up to 30 days in prison, or both. Section 98 of Chapter 272, which details discrimination in admission, gives a maximum $2,500 fine, up to a year in prison, or both. This is on top of any claims that are made by anyone aggrieved by said incident, as previously discussed in Section 5 of Chapter 151B. So still substantial fines, no doubt, but for active discrimination which does not include reporting suspicious activity, whether the culprit be black, white, Christian, Muslim, gay, straight, cis, trans. So in all, said claims have no basis, a fact corroborated in a study published in Sexuality Research and Social Policy in July of 2018. The study, which was titled Gender Identity Non-Discrimination Laws in Public Accommodations, a review of evidence regarding safety and privacy in public restrooms, locker rooms and changing rooms, assess the safety, gender identity inclusive public accommodations non-discrimination ordinances, or GIPANDOs for short, by comparing localities with such policies to match localities without said policies. The study concluded with, quote, "Opponents of gender identity non-discrimination laws in public accommodations have largely cited fear of safety and privacy violations in public bathrooms, locker rooms and changing rooms if such laws are passed, while proponents have argued that the laws do not increase danger or harm in such spaces. To date, no evidence has been gathered to empirically test the hypothesized effect of these laws. This is the first study to collect public records and analytically compare the safety of public restrooms, locker rooms, and changing rooms in localities that have gender identity inclusive non-discrimination laws that apply to public restrooms and match localities that do not have such laws. The results show that the passage of such non-discrimination laws is not related to the number or frequency of criminal incidents in such public spaces. Additionally, the results show that reports of privacy and safety violations in public restrooms, locker rooms, and changing rooms were exceedingly rare and much lower than statewide rates of reporting violent crimes more generally. This study provides evidence that fears of increased safety and privacy violations as a result of non-discrimination laws are not empirically grounded." End quote. Now, do I think the science is enough to stop the bigots being bigots? Not likely. The best we can do is try to ensure said information reaches to those susceptible to both empathy and reasoning. And if any of my viewers are in Massachusetts and can vote in the upcoming ballot, please, as a personal request by me, consider voting yes on free. For more details on how you can help, please check out Freedom for All Massachusetts. Take care now. Hi there, I'd just like to say a few things here at the end of the video before you go. First, I'd like to thank everyone who's ever donated to the channel via Patreon, giving a special thanks to the following people: Hannah Banghart, Matthew Kovac, Alexia Richardson, John Schoenrock, Alexander Williams, and Daniel Martinez. Your support has ensured this channel its ability to grow over the years and really is the only thing that manages to keep the channel afloat. I'd also like to ask that you comment down below and like this video, as well as subscribe and follow Essence of Thought on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please also consider following Atheist Alliance International on Facebook, an organisation dedicated to helping atheists around the globe. Any comments utilising language which insults others on the basis of perceived gender, sexuality, ethnicity, or ability, both mental and physical, will be removed immediately, and the commenter may be blocked on the moderator's discretion. Let's keep this space one which upholds the humanist values. Thank you.